Hey everyone, thinking about it, it's still kind of surprising to me that I'm writing here because when I read other people's stories, I always thought it could never be me. But here I am, adding to the count. I, 32 male, had a beautiful relationship with my now ex-girlfriend, 30 female. I work as a pharmacist at a hospital and she works as part of the administrative staff at another hospital. I'll be changing the names of everyone involved because I'm trying to stay as anonymous as possible, and the last thing I'd want is for people I know to start asking questions. I wouldn't like that. So, Shantae and I met 3 years ago at a party I was invited to by one of my colleagues. She was stunning, and that was the first thing to catch my attention. I know that there are a lot of problems that come with very beautiful women, but I actually felt ready to deal with all of those. At first, I wasn't sure if she even noticed me, but eventually there was a whole lot of eye contact between us, and that was when I realized that I probably stood a chance. A colleague noticed too, and pushed me to go talk to her. I did that, and we ended up chatting about random things like movies, TV shows, and somehow we got to how we both hated pineapple on pizza, a major thing for us to bond over if you ask me. I think for both of us, we clicked immediately, and I remember thinking by the end of that party how much I wouldn't mind if my kids looked as good as her. We exchanged numbers after the party, and since I used to consider myself a bit of a ladies' man back in those days, I made myself wait till the next day to call her. When I finally did, we talked for a bit, and I shot my shot as soon as I could get it into the conversation, and then I asked her out for drinks. She said yes, and that's how it all started. For the first year and a half, everything was great. Shantae wasn't the perfect girlfriend, not like I'm saying there were any major deficiencies, but nobody is perfect, right? I feel very few people find a partner that ticks 90% or more of their preferences. At the end of the day, though, she was kind, caring, and had this thing where she made me feel like her world revolved around me. She had all sorts of good attributes that propelled me after a year to get her to move in with me. Normally, that might have been a decision many people would regret, but it was genuinely smooth for us. Another piece of information I think is important is how close Shantae was to her best friend, Tasha, and her younger sister, Mary. They were like this tight trio that always hung out together, and at first, I thought it was cute. We'd all hang out, and it was a chill vibe. She had known Tasha since they were kids, so I didn't think anything weird about how often they talked or hung out. As for Mary, she was only 2 years younger than Shantae, and they had that strong, sisterly bond where they told each other everything. Mary was not the only sibling she had. There was one sister way older, the firstborn, then 2 brothers before her and Mary. I guessed that's why they were that close. But what got me on edge about the whole thing was when I really started to see the kind of content they watched on a regular basis and the things they would flippantly talk about. All these stupid podcasts that centered on what a man should and should not be doing, and just listening to it made me lose a handful of brain cells. Talking about things like how a man should spend all his money on his lady or buy everything she requests, etc. At that point, I didn't make too much of a big deal about it because although they watched and talked about those kinds of things, when she was with me, she was the sweetest soul. And when I would ask her about this, she would reaffirm that she doesn't share those beliefs. It was just entertainment. Her sister and friends seemed to be big into it, but they're practically and literally family, so I couldn't even suggest she stop hanging out with them. All I could do was advise her to be careful with the type of content she consumed. About a year ago, Shantae started acting off. At first, it wasn't anything big or alarming. It was just little things that I brushed off as stress from her job or life in general. She had recently started working a lot more than usual, and I figured maybe the stress of adult life was starting to get to her. But as time went on, different signs of her acting off started piling up, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. For one, she became super secretive with her phone. That should have clued me in, but she and her phone were normally inseparable, and we had always been pretty chill about our phones. The rule was never to check on each other's phones without notifying the other party, so I never felt the need to snoop, but she never acted like she had something to hide. So why was she suddenly making a habit of putting her phone face down and moving into other rooms and spaces to take a call? It's clear she was having conversations, both over text and calls, that she didn't want me to know about. Then, next in the list of weird things came the girls' nights with Tasha. At first it was happening once a month, which I didn't mind at all. But then it progressed and became every other weekend, with her coming home late, sometimes tipsy, with this look on her face like something was up. It was like she was avoiding eye contact or just being evasive. It's like when your dog knows that it wasn't meant to take a leak on your carpet, but it still did. For example, I'd ask her how her night went, and she'd be very vague about it, giving me replies that made me wonder where my expressive, talkative girlfriend went. She'd also stutter here and there, though that might have just been because she had too much to drink. She'd say stuff like, "Oh, it was fun. We just had drinks and talked about girl stuff." It was maddening as hell. I'd try and pry, but she'd barely budge. Now, the last and the weirdest part of it all was her behavior towards me. She stopped being affectionate. We weren't being intimate with one another as much anymore. It was a notable drop in frequency. And when we did, it felt like she wasn't really into it. She'd give excuses saying she was tired or stressed, but I could tell something was up. She was just pulling away, and I couldn't figure out why. Now, I'm not the type of guy to go full detective mode, but the weird behavior was really messing with my head. I started wondering if she was seeing someone else, but I didn't have any concrete evidence. Still, I had this gut feeling that something wasn't right, so I did what any paranoid boyfriend would do. I started paying more attention to the things she was doing. One night, when she was heading out with the girls, I decided to follow her. This sounds crazy to me even now as I write it, but I had no choice, and I needed to know what was going on and how it was connected to my relationship to affect it this much. So I waited until she left, and then I grabbed my car keys and followed her at a distance. She wasn't going to Tasha's place, as she had said. Instead, she drove across town to this apartment complex. I parked down the street and watched as she went inside. I had no idea whose place it was, although it did look familiar, like I had been there before, but I knew for dang sure it wasn't Tasha's. I really can't recall how long I sat down there, maybe waiting to see if she would come out with someone or just generally contemplating what the hell was going on. Because who was she meeting? I knew for a fact that neither Tasha nor Mary lived there. Was this the evidence I needed that she was cheating on me? It had to be a guy. I was almost sure. My mind was racing and I needed answers before I went insane. At last, I decided to go back home because if I had waited for her to get out of that apartment or seen something, I might have done something terrible. Yes, I had a weapon in my car, not a firearm, but still something that could do damage. Looking back, I should have just stayed the entire night. When she got back home later that night, I didn't confront her. I wanted to, but I didn't have anything solid to back me up. I didn't want to do something too serious or drastic over something I wasn't 100% sure about. I had an extremely strong suspicion, but I've never been one to make irreversible choices before I confirmed things. But from that night on, I knew I had to keep digging, and though I presented a very good loving front to her, I just knew whatever the outcome of these findings were, that trust was dead, and it would be hard to build back up. That's why it'd be better for me to figure out what was going on sooner or later, in case I'd find something that could exonerate her. Over the next few weeks, I kept tabs on her when she went out, whenever I could afford to, or when I was off duty. I'd check her phone when she was in the shower or sleeping. To hell with our phone checking rules, she broke the no lying to each other rule, so she started it first. All this might sound shady, but I needed to know the truth. I don't like being the paranoid guy, but thankfully for me, you can bet on it that finally I found what I was looking for. And dang, it was certainly a shocker, and I 100% would never have guessed what I saw. She had been messaging my good friend, Mike. Mike is married and used to work in the same hospital as I do, which is when we became friends. He works in another location now, though. Although he's way older than me, we were pretty close back then. And these days, we try to hang out as much as we can, typically at bars and stuff after work. I remembered that I had taken her to his birthday party in his apartment earlier on in our relationship, and they got to meet each other for the first time there. That was one of the very few times I went to his apartment, and both times were during the day. It was then that I started to realize it was probably his apartment I followed her to. In my defense, I had last been there over a year ago, and it was night when I got there. Their messages were extremely flirty, way too flirty for people who would likely defend the situation as them being just friends. At first it was stuff like, "Can't wait to see you again," or "Last night was amazing." But then it escalated. There were full-on sexts, pictures, and mentions of nights they'd spent together in bed. I was enraged reading it because these were two people who should have been the absolute closest to me betraying me at the same time and enjoying every second of it. It hurt like hell. I didn't even know who I should have been angry with more, Mike, who I'd known for more than 6 years, or my girlfriend of 3 years. The two people that I felt that I could trust with my life were busy doing things behind my back, and to them, I must have been the extremely foolish guy who knew no better. And the most baffling thing was that Mike had a wife. She's a doctor just like him, but somehow, even with his busy work as a doctor, this guy managed to find the time to have an affair with my wife. I mean, he was brave enough to bring her to their apartment, so his wife must have been on call that night. I was angry and filled with resentment for both of them, and I really wanted to go off on both of them, yell at her and beat the crap out of him, but I just had to hold back. I needed to play this smart. I wasn't just going to confront her and end it. I wanted to make her pay for what she did to me. So I took screenshots of as much of the conversation that I could, and I airdropped that to my phone and deleted the evidence on her phone. I had to do this from time to time when I could get my hands on her phone. I also took as many pictures as I could on the days when I chose to follow her. I then transferred all this to my laptop and deleted it on my phone. I did all these while playing it cool with them both. When I had enough of that evidence, I moved to the next phase. Now, another piece of information I got from their chat was that both Tasha and Mary knew about this affair and were egging her on to push Mike into a divorce and end things with me. After all, a doctor is better than a pharmacist, and that fits nicely into the stupid ideals being pushed by their podcasts. He'd have a lot more money to spend on her. It made me realize, though, that it would be incredibly easy to have my revenge center on her girls. I and Tasha hung out a few times over the years, and while I never really thought of her in that way, I knew she had a thing for me. She always said something about how well I treated Shantae, and maybe because her baby daddy was a good-for-nothing human being, zero affection for both Tasha and her son, it made me more attractive to her. So maybe she wanted what she could not get, affection. She saw Shantae getting it from me. That's the sad part, though. These kinds of women know they just want to be loved deep down, but they'd still betray all of that for money. Tasha had always been flirty, but I never paid much attention to it until now. I reached out to her, and we started talking. I took it slow and steady. I would send her things, gifts that were nothing much to me, with the excuse of wanting to know what was going on with Shantae, and I made her promise not to tell. It didn't take long before things heated up between us, especially after one slightly expensive gift, and we ended up hooking up. I made sure she sent nudes to me, with her face in them and everything, and we even made some tapes together. But I wasn't done, far from it. My focus went to Shantae's sister, Mary, and Mary made it so easy with her rebellious streak. I don't think that she found me uncontrollably attractive. I just think that she just found it powerful that she could get her sister's man to fall for her. It was taboo, and that made it hot to her. I played her like a fiddle. I'd call her and chat her up about her day, listen to her problems, and also love bomb her. When she started flirting with me, I knew it was time to invite her to come stay with us for a bit, under the pretense that Shantae, due to her busy schedule and mine, was frequently lonely and would benefit from a constant companion at home. I would drive them both to work, but I dropped off Shantae first. It wasn't long before Mary was wearing outrageous outfits when Shantae wasn't home, so we hooked up too. No surprise there. I got nudes from her too, and managed to make a tape or two with her as well. Till today, I don't know how I pulled that off. I know I have game, but I never thought I'd be able to get my partner's best friend and her sister to fold like that. I guess it helps that they weren't exactly women of great morality. Like, how did I manage to make them both feel like they were the only one in my life, and what I had with Shantae was temporary? I don't know, but I did it. I guess, for the Shantae part, they knew that it was truly temporary since they were aware of her affair. Perhaps they wanted to get their piece before Shantae left me for Mike. Kudos to them too, since they told me nothing about the affair while we were intimate. I think they've got off knowing that they were the kinds of women who could make a man who was so invested in other women throw it away, at least for the moment. Now, I had what I needed to really ruin Shantae's life. I wasn't just going to break her heart, I was going to destroy her entire world. Once I had everything set up, I created a chat group. I added Shantae, Tasha, Mary, Mike's wife, and Shantae's mom to the group. A girls' group, if you will. It'd be messiest that way. First, I posted screenshots of Shantae's chats with Mike, the flirty messages, the sexts, the nudes, thirst traps, everything. Then, I posted the videos of me with Tasha and Mary, including the chats that contained the nudes. I felt kind of off doing that, probably illegal in some way, but I didn't care that much. They weren't the kinds to get legal on anyone. Last, I wrote a very concise message of how I thought they were all trash and how they deserved each other, making sure to exclude Mike's wife from it. She was a victim in it all, but I told her she had to know the truth. I did all that when I knew Shantae was doing a double shift, and by then Mary was out of the house. I had given an excuse prior of how much I loved her and did not want my relationship to jeopardize what we had. Before anyone could respond, I exited the group and blocked everyone involved, including Mike. To top it off, as soon as I exited the group, I threw Shantae and her sister's remaining belongings out of my house. Beforehand, I had called a locksmith, with the permission of my landlord, to change the locks. Then, I went over to a friend's place to spend the rest of the month. So yep, I wasn't even at home and they couldn't get in. My idiot of a girlfriend came to harass me on my way out of the hospital building at the end of the next day, crying and pleading. She did not care about the people who were staring at the fact that she was making a scene. I hate scenes, and since she was literally wailing, I had to push her into my car. She started apologizing and promising heaven and earth if I'd get back with her. When I refused, she started talking about how I had ruined her relationship with her siblings, her parents, her friends, and so on and so on. Her childhood friend Tasha wasn't talking to her anymore too, amongst some other things. I just waited for her to finish talking. Then I started letting out every insult I had been too kind to say before. I threatened to give her pictures to the security officers at the hospital so that if they ever saw her step foot in the premises again, she would be gotten rid of. She tried to say something, but I didn't want to hear it. I calmly told her to get out of my car. She begged, cried, tried to explain herself, but I just told her to get out before I did something she wouldn't like. She got out, disheveled, and crying like a child, and I drove off. As for Mike, he's dead to me. I cut him off completely and I haven't looked back. It's nice to know that his marriage fell apart too, after a revelation to his wife. She made off well in the split too. I heard through mutual friends that Shantae isn't doing so well with work and her social life isn't all that bubbly either. No surprise when her major going out partners are gone. Plus, mutual friends have all known what happened, so all three of them are like pariahs in their social circles. Looking back, I know this whole situation was toxic as hell, but sometimes you just have to fight fire with fire. Would I do it again? Hell yes, because it felt very good how things ended. It was messy, and it's not my usual tact. But hey, being morally upstanding clearly didn't get me anywhere in the relationship. I'm glad being messy like all those podcast girls did.